Hey everyone, I'm back again to continue my list of my 50 favourite films. Today we're going to do number 40 to number 31, so let's get things rolling straight away. Number 40, Showgirls.
Okay ladies, I got one interest here, and that's the show. I don't care whether you live or die. I want to see you dance, and I want to see you smile. I can't use you if you can't smile. I can't use you if you can't show. I can't use you if you can't sell.
Many will know this was a massive critical and commercial failure when it was released in the mid-90s, but 2 decades later it's the camp, overly sexualised nature of the film and the glamorous nature of the film has kind of turned it into a cult classic in itself, and many see this film as a chauvinistic and degrading film to women, but you have the other side of the argument, which is kind of looking at the satirical side and whether that kind of degradation and chauvinistic nature of the film was the point of what the writer Joe Estehas and the director Paul Verhoeven were trying to get across. And I'm kind of in that sort of camp myself. Like, I can see why people would think it was degrading, but I kind of see the satirical side of it. And the fun, campy side of it, of course. I love all the dance scenes and everything, and just the trashiness of the film and the fun side of the film is what I really enjoy about it. So it's really creating a satirical look into the highly competitive showgirl scene in Las Vegas, where rich, sleazy men rule and the women are dolls in their game of power and corruption, and almost everybody is a terrible or conniving person, which this film definitely conveys quite a bit. There's really only 1 or 2 characters who are genuinely good people, and the rest of the cast of characters are quite awful in one way or another. Elizabeth Berkley had a lot of guts to even agree to take on this film, knowing how exposed she would be as a person and how conniving and unlikable her character becomes throughout the film as she crawls her way to the top of the seediness. Her career basically plummeted after this, and I mean, it's a fun and campy film with some very confronting scenes for something that was made in America, but it's very much the style of Paul Verhoeven at the time. This kind of sexual thriller kind of genre was sort of started with the same writing and directing team as this film, so Joe Estehas and Paul Verhoeven, when they made Basic Instinct. But I mean, it wasn't as nearly well received as that film was. That film was a humongous hit, and this film definitely wasn't. But yeah, this film is still alive all these years later and still has quite a big following. It was never going to score any Oscars, but on a trashy entertainment level it succeeds if you take it as the satire it was likely conceived as.
Showgirls. Leave your inhibitions at the door.
Number 39 is The Life and Death of Peter Sellers.
Who are you?
I'm Peter. Peter Sellers.
So this is basically a look at Peter Sellers' cinematic life, basically conceived as a Peter Sellers film. Jeffrey Rush nails the challenging role of being able to convincingly pass Sellers and all the different characters he played throughout his illustrious career, and also most of the characters in this film at one point or another. Jeffrey Rush as Peter Sellers portrays these characters in little tiny segments throughout the film, so it really goes to show how talented Jeffrey Rush is as an actor and how much range he has, but also how talented and how much range Peter Sellers had as an actor. There's a good look at many of Peter Sellers' films up until his death in 1980, basically from his films in the 50s all the way up to Being There, which was one of his last films. We go through The Pink Panther, of course, a few other films. There's so many films that don't get mentioned, but he did do a lot of films. The supporting cast is fantastic as well. You've got Charlize Theron as Sellers' second wife, Britt Eklund, John Lithgow playing the Pink Panther director, Blake Edwards, and Miriam Margolyes is really excellent as Peter Sellers' overbearing mother, and the film definitely hints at Sellers' mother being an underlying cause of of his later mental health kind of issues and relationship problems. It was originally made for TV, but in Australia it did get a theatrical release, and I think maybe a few other countries it did too. And it actually won Geoffrey Rush a Golden Globe and an Emmy Award, which definitely was well deserved. This is one of his best performances in my opinion, and yeah, a must watch if you're either a fan of Sellers or the sheer artistry of Geoffrey Rush's acting work.
You make me feel so young.
Number 38 is Waiting.
Is everything prepared okay?
How about some dessert?
How would you like your steak prepared?
The 5-second rule! The 5-second rule! 2, 3!
We almost had to switch to the 10-second rule.
So this is probably one of the best films I've ever seen about working a hospitality or customer service job. A lot of the situations that these characters get into this film ring very true to someone who's worked in that kind of job before. Their encounters with customers, the shenanigans of what happens behind the scenes of shenanigans, and definitely their interactions with each other. It rings very true for anyone who's ever worked in that kind of job before. It was quite a low budget film and didn't make a huge impact when it came out, but again it's kind of gained a bit of a cult following in the following years. It's a pretty simple film, but it has a really great cast. You've got Ryan Reynolds, Anna Faris, and Justin Long. But I think the real two stars of this film are definitely Alana Ubach. She's just so funny in this film, and her character's kind of short temper makes for some incredibly hilarious scenes and interactions with her and the other characters. And then you've got John Francis Daley, who some of you might know from Freaks and Geeks and a few other things. He spends most of this film not saying very much at all, but right at the end of the film has this incredible outburst, and it's probably the highlight of the film for me. It's such a funny moment of the film and really makes the film as great as it is. And but yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you've worked in that kind of job before, because there's definitely a lot of things that you can relate to working in a restaurant environment or any customer service environment. Number 37 is Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Want to get through this?
Now, I'm a huge fan of the Mad Max series, and I definitely believe that each separate Mad Max film stands on its own as a classic, but I literally waited half my life to see this film. It was announced initially in the early 2000s, but didn't really see the light of day until 2015. And yeah, it didn't disappoint me when I went and saw it. If anything, it exceeded my expectations, and it definitely goes to show how great and how talented a director George Miller is, and how incredibly amazing he is at making sequels and series of films. He definitely proved that with the Mad Max series, with the Happy Feet series, with the Babe series. He can make a follow-up film without it being a carbon copy of any of the previous films. As an action film, it really is quite incredible. The amount of real stunts that the film uses, there definitely is some CGI moments in there, but the real stunts just are so incredibly done. In a time where there is so many action films out there that rely on CGI, this film really came out and had so many moments that weren't CGI and were done for real and done on such an epic large scale. It was just incredible to watch. George Miller just fills every frame of that film with so much and keeps the pace going. It's basically a long chase film, and his cast are incredible. I mean, you've got Tom Hardy as Max, who really does a great job taking over from Mel Gibson, and of course Charlize Theron as Furiosa is just incredible. Her performance is definitely not a damsel in distress. She's basically the equal to Max. If anything, and yeah, really shows how great a leading female action heroine can be in a film, and it's really dazzling and quite a feast for the eyes, and there's really hardly a moment when the film slows down, but when it does slow down for those little moments, there's plenty of somber moments that develop the intricate characters without really needing to rely on extended scenes of dialogue, which is a very challenging thing to do and to actually do without screwing up, but it works so well in this film. Every little detail is incredible, right down to the very intricate Academy Award-winning production design of the film. I mean, every vehicle has its own unique look and features, and that's really cool. And it's like this film is just such a large-scale production that's just so rarely seen these days in film, and it's one more tremendous film to add to George Miller's portfolio of incredible work. And yeah, I can't really say much more about it except it's awesome, and I can watch it again and again and enjoy it. But I definitely suggest having a big screen and surround sound to watch this, because otherwise you don't really get that escapist feel that you would without having that. And yeah, it was made for the cinemas, definitely, and worth going to see at the cinemas, and having to listen to other people chew popcorn and play on their phones. Number 36, Scary Movie.
Hello.
I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna slice you up.
Who is
I'm
this?
gonna chop you like liver.
What do you want?
I'm in the house. Do you know where I am? I could be anywhere. I'm like the wind, baby. Yeah. Where am I?
You're behind the couch.
What? How do you know that?
I can see your feet.
So the Wayans brothers capitalised on the success of 90s slashers like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer with this very funny parody. Probably one of the last funny parodies that came out before the likes of Jason Freeberg and Aaron Salzer came along and kind of ruined the genre with all their terrible films, so like Date Movie, Epic Movie, Disaster Movie. Those two guys are interestingly credited as writers in this film, but according to the Wayans brothers, they were only contractually obligated to appear as writers because they wrote a treatment that wasn't used for the film. So, but that's, I guess, how they managed to get the money to make all these other films and ruin the genre. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about them, I'm here to talk about this movie. So for me, this movie is probably most notable for the first starring role with Anna Faris, who hilariously enough isn't featured on the original poster for the film. But yeah, this was her first starring role as Cindy Campbell, and she just steals every scene. She's just so funny. Her reactions to other characters and situations, and the way she delivers her lines, the way her character moves, and her physical performance, it's all very funny, and it's yeah, definitely easy to see why she became so popular after these films came out. But along with Anna Faris, you have some other amazingly talented comedic actors, Regina Hall, Marlon Wayans, just to name a few, that all have very funny moments and all bring something different to their characters and have all funny scenes on their own. So basically, it was released at a perfect time to target these films, and ultimately was a massive success, which spawned 4 sequels, of course, which didn't match the success of this one, but were okay in their own right as well. But this original one is definitely worth checking out, because it's probably, yeah, it's just so many funny inspired moments, I think, especially if you're a fan of the 90s slashers and a fan of Anna Faris and the Wayans brothers.
Hey, you guys hear that? Hello? What's your favorite scary movie?
Number 35 is The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Do you have the Texas Chainsaw Mascara?
This is a very important and relevant film for Australia a quarter of a century later. It's about 3 drag performers, 2 who are gay and 1 who's transgender, basically travelling from Sydney to Alice Springs on a bus to perform a big drag show in Alice Springs and perform drag shows along the way. It definitely gave new humanity and breath to the community in Australia, and not only are the Oscar-winning costumes ingeniously designed and characters in themselves, along with, of course, the bus, the performances by the 3 leads are just fantastic. Hugo Weaving, Guy Pearce, and in particular Terence Stamp as Bernadette, who is really tragically overlooked for an Oscar for this role, but it's definitely one of his most memorable performances for me, and the standout performance of this film. The scene in Broken Hill where Bernadette confronts a local bigoted woman at the local pub and then beats her at a drinking contest is definitely one of the best and funniest in the whole film.
We've got nothing here for people like you. Nothing.
Now listen here, you mullet. Why don't you just light your tampon and blow your box apart? Because it's the only bang you're ever gonna get, sweetheart.
But there are many more funny scenes and some very confronting scenes too, as the 3 make their way from Sydney to Alice Springs on this bus. The unpredictable landscape of the Australian outback is really conveyed quite well through the cinematography, through the performances, and the contrast between the colourful nature of the bus and the costumes versus the often harsh and unforgiving landscape of the desert. Yeah, it really is a classic of both queer cinema and Australian cinema in general, and if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out, because it's quite an incredible film that wasn't made for very much money, but has a huge impact, definitely. Number 34 is Duel.
How can he go so fast?
So Steven Spielberg made this film for TV and for the drive-in movies a few years before he hit it big with Jaws, and in my opinion this is probably a more suspenseful film than Jaws in a lot of ways. So definitely not made for the same sort of money, but a film that is as suspenseful or even more suspenseful than Jaws was. It's a simple low-budget cat and mouse plot, but it works so well. And the monstrous old diesel truck is an antagonistic and terrifying character in itself, pursuing Dennis Weaver along the near-empty highways of Middle America. The sound and production design of the smoky old truck is really well done and adds layers of terror to the film, and Dennis Weaver's protagonist carries the film right to the end and keeps the tension flowing and at a high level as the pursuit across the highways goes on and the stakes get higher. This is definitely a perfect example of a little film made for very little money, but still creating all the elements to be a very successful thriller and quite entertaining. There are some really excellent stunts in this film as well. There's definitely one that stands out to me is when Dennis Weaver has to use the public phone. The truck basically turns around on the road and comes straight for him, and it's done really well. He gets out of the way just before the truck flattens his phone box, and it's really well done and very suspenseful. So yeah, check it out if you're a fan of Spielberg and you haven't seen this film, or just any kind of road thrillers. I think this is definitely one of the best ones for me. Number 33 is Romy and Michele's high school reunion.
Let's do it.
Now I gotta cut loose, cut loose.
I have no idea what the rest of the lyrics are.
Me neither.
Woo! Watch out, Tucson, here we come!
For me, this is one of the funniest films of the 90s. It's a great film about friendship and having confidence in yourself, basically. Lisa Kudrow and Mira Sorvino cast perfectly, and as high school best friends who are living in California, and they get invited to their 10-year reunion in Tucson, Arizona. But aim to impress their former bullies and classmates by making up a story about inventing Post-its. The two leads have such amazing chemistry, and their conversations about high school memories and life in general are very well written and funny, and along with some hilarious and some very tragic flashbacks to their high school days and their run-ins with their bullies. There's a few off-kilter moments in this film that really add that other layer of uniqueness to the film as a whole, and there's this well-staged dream sequence as an example, which is quite funny and quite strange. The supporting cast is also incredibly good. The standout definitely being Janine Garofalo as a chain-smoking, profane outcast from their high school who has some jilted memories of her own that she confronts throughout the film. The great soundtrack is also worth mentioning. There's many 80s and 90s tunes popping up as the film goes on. But yeah, the soundtrack has some really great hits in it and is one of the best parts of the film as well. But it's definitely one of the most original and funny comedies of the 90s, and well worth checking out if you haven't already, especially if you're a fan of the two leading ladies. Number 32 is Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit.
Oh, come on, Gromit. A bit more alluring.
The stop-motion pair's first big screen outing is very well designed and executed very well by Nick Park and the Aardman animation crew, who've been doing Wallace and Gromit since the beginning, along with Peter Sallis, who plays Wallace, and a supporting cast which includes Ray Fiennes as the dastardly Victor Quartermain, and scene stealer Helena Bonham Carter as the upper-class Lady Tottington of Tottington Hall, who has some pretty funny scenes and some very funny lines in there. It's just as enjoyable for adults as it is for kids. It has a very energetic pace, and it's really great to see that Aardman Studios got to work with a bigger than usual budget for their most loved character duo. It gives rein to some really, really well done animation and camera work. There's definitely some really funny scenes in there, some very clever sly references that adults could definitely catch on to. It could probably fly over the heads of many kids, but yeah, it's quite funny if you're into that British humour. Even if you're not, there's really something to like for everyone, I think, in this film, and it's very enjoyable and entertaining for me.
Gromit, old pal, I'll need assistance.
And number 31 is Dumb and Dumber. I'm sorry, I don't have a DVD copy of this film, so I can't hold it up for you.
Okay. Yes.
This was one of the first big films that the Farrelly brothers made, and throughout their career they didn't really come that close to topping this this film. There's so many elements that make it the classic it's become in the comedy genre, and it's at the heart. It's really about cherished friendship between two guys who've known each other for a long time and who decide to take a road trip because of a confusion over ransom money with a young woman. The situation the two characters, Lloyd and Harry, have put themselves in helps to create a lot of interesting scenarios for them to get into as they make their way to Aspen to find this woman, Mary. And Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels are both lovably idiotic and have excellent chemistry as Harry and Lloyd. Their physically energetic performances really make the film worthwhile, particularly with Jim Carrey, but Jeff Daniels also has some really hilarious moments in this film. There's a lot of quotable lines and scenes, and some standouts probably include Lloyd's fantasy scene involving Mary, and Harry, who takes a day trip to the snow with Mary, where he gets very competitive with a snowball and then proceeds to get his tongue stuck on some dry ice on the ski lift. Yeah, so there's only a few of very, very funny scenes, but yeah, I've watched this film so many times and can probably quote it back to front. It's one of those scenes that I love, one of those movies, sorry, that I love so much and have watched so many times. And yeah, at its heart, it's definitely a great film about a friendship.
That's a lovely accent you have. New Jersey?
Austria.
Austria? Well then, good day, mate. Let's put another shrimp on the barbie.
Let's not.
So that's number 40 and number 31. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back next time with number 30 to number 21. See you then.